Paul was in a most execrable temper, and I could get nothing out of him but blame, irritable words, and disagreeable remarks. Mademoiselle Francesca ate like an ogre, and as soon as she was finished her meal she threw herself upon the sofa in the sitting room. Sitting beside her, I said gallantly, kissing her hand, "Shall I have the bed prepared, or will you sleep on the couch? It is all the same to me, che mi fa." Her indifference vexed me. "Should you like to retire at once?" "Yes, I'm very sleepy." She got up, yawned, gave her hand to Paul, who took it with a furious look, and I lighted her into the bedroom. A disquieting feeling haunted me. "Here is all you want," I said again. The next morning she got up early, like a woman who is accustomed to work. She woke me up doing so, and I watched her through half-closed eyelids. She came and went without hurrying herself, as if she were astonished at having nothing to do. At length she went to the dressing-table, and in a moment emptied all my bottles of perfume. She certainly also used some water, but very little. When she was quite dressed, she sat down on her trunk again, and clasping one knee between her hands, she seemed to be thinking. At that moment I pretended to first notice her, and said, "Good morning, Francesca." Without seeming at all in a better temper than the previous night, she murmured, "Good morning." When I asked her whether she had slept well, she nodded her head, and jumping out of bed, I went and kissed her. She turned her face toward me like a child who is being kissed against its will. But I took her tenderly in my arms and gently pressed my lips on her eyelids, which she closed with evident distaste under my kisses on her fresh cheek and full lips, which she turned away. "You do not seem to like being kissed," I said to her. "Mica," was her only answer. I sat down on the trunk by her side, and passing my arm through hers, I said, "Mica, Mica, Mica," in reply to everything. "I shall call you Mademoiselle Mica, I think." For the first time I fancied I saw the shadow of a smile on her lips, but it passed so quickly that I may have been mistaken. "But if you never say anything but Mica, I shall not know what to do to please you. Let me see, what shall we do today?" She hesitated a moment, as if some fancy had flitted through her head, and then she said carelessly, "It is all the same to me, whatever you like." "Very well, Mademoiselle Mica, we will have a carriage and go for a drive." "As you please," she said. Paul was waiting for us in the dining room, looking as bored as third parties usually do in love affairs. I assumed a delighted air, and shook hands with him with triumphant energy. "What are you thinking of doing?" he asked. "First of all, we shall go and see a little of the town, and then we might get a carriage and take a drive into the neighborhood." We breakfasted almost in silence, and then set out. I dragged Francesca from palace to palace, and she either looked at nothing or merely glanced carelessly at various masterpieces. Paul followed us, growling all sorts of disagreeable things. Then we all three took a drive in silence into the country and returned to dinner. The next day the same thing, and the next day again. And on the third Paul said to me, "Look here, I'm going to leave you. I am not going to stop here for 3 weeks watching you make love to this creature." I was perplexed and annoyed, for to my great surprise I had become singularly attached to Francesca. A man is but weak and foolish, carried away by the merest trifle, and a coward every time his senses are excited or mastered. I clung to this unknown girl, silent and dissatisfied as she always was. I liked her somewhat ill-tempered face, the dissatisfied droop of her mouth, the weariness of her look. I liked her fatigued movements, the contemptuous way in which she let me kiss her, the very indifference of her caresses. A secret bond, that mysterious bond of physical love, which does not satisfy, bound me to her. I told Paul so quite frankly. He treated me as if I were a fool, and then said, "Very well, take her with you." But she obstinately refused to leave Genoa, without giving any reason. I besought, I reasoned, I promised, and all was of no avail, and so I stayed on. Paul declared that he would go by himself, and went so far as to pack up his portmanteau, but he remained all the same. Thus a fortnight passed. Francesca was always silent and irritable, lived beside me rather than with me, responded to all my requirements and all my propositions with her perpetual che mi fa, or with her no less perpetual Mica. My friend became more and more furious, but my only answer was, "You can go if you are tired of staying. I am not detaining you." Then he called me names, overwhelmed me with reproaches, and exclaimed, "Where do you think I can go now? We had 3 weeks at our disposal, and here is a fortnight gone. I cannot continue my journey now, and, in any case, I'm not going to Venice, Florence, and Rome all by myself. but you will pay for it, and more dearly than you think, most likely. You are not going to bring a man all the way from Paris in order to shut him up at a hotel in Genoa with an Italian adventuress." When I told him, very calmly, to return to Paris, he exclaimed that he intended to do so the very next day. But the next day he was still there, still in a rage and swearing. By the time we began to know the streets through which we wandered from morning till night, sometimes French people would turn round astonished at meeting their fellow countrymen in the company of this girl with such a striking costume, who looked singularly out of place, not to say compromising, beside us. She used to walk along, leaning on my arm, without looking at anything. Why did she remain with me, with us, who seemed so little to amuse her? Who was she? Where did she come from? What was she doing? Had she any plan or idea? Where did she live? As an adventuress? Or by chance meetings? I tried in vain to find out and to explain it. The better I knew her, the more enigmatic she became. She seemed to be a girl of poor family who had been taken away, and then cast aside and lost. What did she think would become of her, or whom was she waiting for? She certainly did not appear to be trying to make a conquest of me, or to make any real profit out of me. I tried to question her, to speak to her of her childhood and family, but she never gave me an answer. I stayed with her, my heart unfettered, my senses enchained, never wearied of holding her in my arms, that proud and quarrelsome woman, captivated by my senses, or rather carried away, overcome by a youthful, healthy, powerful charm which emanated from her fragrant person and from the well-molded lines of her body. Another week passed, and the term of my journey was drawing on, for I had to be back in Paris by the 11th of July. By this time Paul had come to take his part in the adventure, though still grumbling at me, while I invented pleasures, distractions, and excursions to amuse Francesca and my friend, and in order to do this I gave myself a great amount of trouble. One day I proposed an excursion to Santa Margherita, that charming little town in the midst of gardens, hidden at the foot of a slope which stretches far into the sea up to the village of Portofino. We three walked along the excellent road which goes along the foot of the mountain. Suddenly Francesca said to me, "I shall not be able to go with you tomorrow. I must go and see some of my relatives." That was all. I did not ask her any questions, as I was quite sure she would not answer me. The next morning she got up very early. When she spoke to me, it was in a constrained and hesitating voice. "If I do not come back again, shall you come and fetch me?" "Most certainly I shall," was my reply. "Where shall I go to find you?" Then she explained. "You must go into the street Victor Emmanuel, down the Falcone Road and the side street San Raphael, and into the furniture shop in the building on the right at the end of a court, and there you must ask for Madame Rondoli. That is the place." And so she went away, leaving me rather astonished. When Paul saw that I was alone, he stammered out, "Where is Francesca?" And when I told him what had happened, he exclaimed, "My dear fellow, let us make use of our opportunity and bolt. As it is, our time is up. 2 days more or less make no difference. Let us go at once. Go and pack up your things. Off we go." But I refused. I could not, as I told him, leave the girl in that manner after such companionship for nearly 3 weeks. At any rate, I ought to say good-bye to her, and make her accept a present. I certainly had no intention of behaving badly to her, but he would not listen. He pressed and worried me, and I would not give way. I remained indoors for several hours, expecting Francesca's return, but she did not come, and at last at dinner Paul said with a triumphant air, "She has flown, my dear fellow. It is certainly very strange." I must acknowledge that I was surprised and rather vexed. He laughed in my face and made fun of me. "It is not exactly a bad way of getting rid of you, though rather primitive. Just wait for me. I shall be back in a moment," they often say. "How long are you going to wait? I should not wonder if you were foolish enough to go and look for her at the address she gave you." "Does Madame Rondoli live here, please?" "No, monsieur." "I'll bet that you are longing to go there." "Not in the least," I protested. "And I assure you that if she does not come back tomorrow morning, I shall leave by the express at 8 o'clock. I shall have waited 24 hours, and that is enough. My conscience will be quite clear." I spent an uneasy and unpleasant evening, for I really had at heart a very tender feeling for her. I went to bed at 12 o'clock and hardly slept at all. And I got up at 6, called Paul, packed up my things, and 2 hours later we set out for France together. The Rondoli Sisters, Part 3. The next year, at just about the same period, I was seized, as one is with a periodical fever, with a new desire to go to Italy, and I immediately made up my mind to carry it into effect. There is no